Are Chinese students studying in the U.S. a national security risk?
We want a list of those foreign students, and we'll find out whether or not they're okay.
Donald Trump's position is that, yes, they may very well be a threat.
We just want to check out the individual students. And that's true with all colleges.
So here is the Trump administration's answer, at least for now, to this question. The U.S. State Department will work with the Department of Homeland Security to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. Now, there are a couple ways you might interpret this. Maybe as a broad discriminatory attack against an important source of outside knowledge, or as a legitimate attempt to protect American interests and national security. But either way, the very moment you dig beneath the surface, you realize there is no easy way to do what the government says it will do. And the stakes of even being seen to try put at risk more than half a century of conventional wisdom.
Quite honestly, I've got no idea what he's talking about.
Whether this will actually change the Chinese position, I think that's a curious question.
China's been ripping us off for many years.
It's hard to know what Trump hates the most about China. Is it the trade imbalance?
They've really taken advantage of our country for a long period of time.
Is it their stranglehold on critical raw materials, currently in short supply in the U.S.?
As you know, we're looking for rare earth all the time.
Is it that they threaten the dominance of American tech?
Huawei is something that's very dangerous from a security standpoint, from a military standpoint.
American EVs?
BYD, the Chinese giant taking on Tesla.
Even American AI.
A brand new AI chatbot out of China sent ripples through American markets.
But whatever the answer, a deep distrust of Chinese students has also been a long-standing concern for the U.S. government under Trump, but also well beyond Trump.
It shouldn't be surprising that this is a national security concern, right? We have seen plenty of Chinese students studying here in the US, then bring the technologies back to China for their own company or joining other Chinese companies.
And this is something the Trump administration has repeatedly flagged because, just to make the argument, what stops a Chinese molecular biologist in the US studying cures for a disease from using that knowledge to create diseases? Or what stops a Chinese computer scientist from applying their work in machine learning to develop a smarter way for China to launch ballistic missiles? The Trump government also points to stories like this of Chinese students compromised and in some cases criminally charged in the US for spying. During Trump's first term, he signed an order citing as a major threat the PRC's acquisition of sensitive United States technologies and intellectual property to modernize its military. And so that proclamation barred Chinese students with ties to their country's military from obtaining US visas. That order held up even through Joe Biden's term in office. And I've seen reporting out there suggesting somewhere around 1,000 Chinese students and researchers at the time had their visas revoked under this specific policy. But to understand Trump's war on Chinese students, let's look even more recently than that. In March, Republicans introduced a bill in the House called the Stop Chinese Communist Prying by Vindicating Intellectual Safeguards in Academia Act. Not the catchiest name, but it's clear and it goes further than I've ever seen any similar bill go, by casting a really broad net. An alien who is a national of the People's Republic of China may not be issued a visa for the purpose of conducting research or pursuing a course of study. Translation: no Chinese students in the US, effectively, no matter who they are or what they're studying at whatever level. Then, just about a week ago came the State Department's threat to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, a quote-unquote new policy, but which the Trump administration, when pressed by reporters, downplayed as not being new at all.
Every sovereign country has a right to know who's trying to come in, why they want to come in, who they are, what they've been doing. That's nothing new, and we will continue to use every tool we can.
Except she's not quite correct. The experts we spoke to told us there is one big piece of what the State Department has announced that is new, and it's the specific mention of targeting those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party, i.e., the dominant political force in modern-day China for the last 75 years. Now, on the face of it, if the goal is to prevent Chinese espionage or intellectual property theft, maybe having ties to the Chinese government should be disqualifying, especially when you consider how many students from China with potential ties to the CCP come to the US to study each year. Here's the breakdown by country. India, the top source of foreign students to the US, but China close behind. And going back a quarter of a century, you can see how a new era of academic exchange has been taking root. The number of Chinese nationals studying in the US exploding until the pandemic, which maybe isn't surprising. But those numbers have continued to drop year after year, long after the world emerged from lockdown.
Because it's such a hostile environment, why would Chinese students pay the full tuition and be subject to such hostile treatment in the United States?
This represents a gradual undoing of more than 50 years of diplomacy, where academic exchange was seen as a way of building bridges, establishing ties, pushing back against propaganda and rhetoric, and from the US point of view, tapping into a population with money to spend, a culture of prioritizing academic achievement that has for decades been an important source of knowledge, skill, and expertise.
Typically, exchange programs have really been trying to work those diplomatic soft power relationships that can keep the door open to broader political agreements in the future.
But back to reality, 2025 edition, and the question: if the US now sees China, and particularly Chinese students, as a threat, is this new policy of vetting for ties to the Chinese Communist Party a logical way of going about doing that?
The CCP is a civilian party with over 98 million members. That makes it the largest organization in the history of the human race, other than maybe the Catholic Church.
Yeah, the latest count I saw was that there are an estimated 99 million members of the CCP. And the reason there are so many is maybe pragmatic and not always or even usually political.
Membership in the CCP is a really poor measure of someone's intentions. Some people join at a young age at the encouragement of family. It's really hard to leave the CCP. And you also have others who join as a formality in order to be able to work at state-owned enterprises, which account for about 25% of China's economy and include some of its biggest banks. It has a light footprint almost everywhere. Almost every high school and every university in China has a Communist Party secretary as part of school leadership.
And just to underscore the point, admittedly with some old data that goes back to 2009, but it is really hard to find a more modern version of this, and I think it's the principle that matters most. This research paper from the National University of Singapore found that civil servants broadly are not necessarily members of the Chinese Communist Party, but 95% of civil servants in leading positions are party members.
From what we know, party affiliation in China is often due to career advancement. It's just something that you need if you want to improve your job prospects, your social standing.
Again, going to this idea that CCP membership may not be the best way to figure out if someone is going to act against US interests. So, back to that question. If national security is really what the US State Department's new posture on Chinese students is all about, then is this really an effective way of going about it?
In America, we might think of this as something akin to the Cub Scouts or the Boys and Girl Scouts. In China, there's the Young Pioneers. And then in students' high school ages, there is the Communist Youth League. So you may very well have a 12-year-old who was encouraged by their teachers and their parents to join the Young Pioneers. So is that student who signed up for the Young Pioneers as a 12-year-old, is that something that's going to result in a 30-year-old PhD student who's a leader in AI getting deported from the United States?
It's important to mention there is already a standard set of security checks that all international students, including Chinese students, must go through to be able to study in the US. The Department of Homeland Security regularly runs the names of prospective students against an FBI database, checking for known criminal or terrorist activity. They're often interviewed at U.S. embassies by consular officials before being approved. And for Chinese students in particular, it's been standard practice for years to vet social media accounts as well, checking for any ideological red flags.
The U.S. has enhanced vetting already in place for internationals who pursue PhD and research track master's programs in critical fields through tools like the Visas Mantis and the Interagency Security Advisory Opinions. These tools already exist. Chinese students, and on top of that, go through additional vetting already.
But now it sounds like the Trump administration wants to add this extra layer of vetting, potentially reviewing the student visas of somewhere around 300,000 existing Chinese students in the US right now, not to mention the thousands of new arrivals each year. And against the criterion of not just membership within the Chinese Communist Party, but even mere connections to it.
By saying connections, that does leave it vague, which also gives them room theoretically to be as expansive and inspecific as they want to be when they choose how they actually want to enforce this policy in the future.
China is not going to give America a list of the members of the Communist Party. So we're going to be grasping for some kind of proxies or measurements of what it means to have a connection to the CCP.
But as is often the case, how the plan works may matter less than the fact that just assuming a hostile position against China changes the state of play. For Chinese nationals interested in coming to America, uncertainty is a deterrent. So no matter the intention, no matter the method, if at least part of the goal is simply to spurn China, maybe Trump can already say, mission accomplished.